All right, here in Illustrator, what we're looking at is making some festival collateral. Now, you could use any kind of festival, I do not care. It could be a music festival, a food expo, any kind of gathering, any kind of event, and you're going to promote it. And with that promotion, you're going to need to create some collateral. So now that collateral includes many of the things that I mentioned before in terms of starting off with a logo. Now with that logo, we're going to be needing, specific things that you want to utilize to create some really engaging looks, something really eye-catching, very visually appealing. So that's what this particular project is all about, is really making it something really enjoyable to look at, something like really wow factor. So that's kind of what I want to push. And if there's some rules that need to be broken, we could break some rules to, push the particular look or something we want to do. I really want to get visually effective here. Really creative, really, a lot of color, a lot of fun. Now you can do minimalist style. You could kind of really bring it down a little bit, but I still want you to bring in all the factors, all those specs that you need to bring in. So let's just get started. I'm going to refer back to my initial look here that I have, but I am going to set up my own document because I'm going to help you set up yours. It's actually very simple in how we're going to do that. So I'm going to create a new document, Command N or File New. And I'm going to have many artboards, but I'm going to bring them in one by one. So what I'm going to start with, I'm going to make it inches, and then I'm going to bring it down to, let's start with the first one. One of the first artboards was a 10 by 5 artboard for the logo, because you're going to show a logo that is on white and then a reverse, one that is on a darker background. It doesn't have to be black, but it does have to be a darker background. Here I used a darker blue, but it doesn't matter. My bleed, yes, I definitely want a bleed setup. So here's a kind of a tricky thing here. Well, I have artboards that are actually large artboards and smaller artboards. And you know that if I'm using a smaller artboard, I only probably need to use 1/8 of an inch for bleed. However, on larger artboards like this one, 24 by 36 and 24 by 24, I should probably use a larger one. So you know what, for all of them, I'm just gonna make them 1/4 of an inch. Bleed, just so at least I know my large ones are safe, and then obviously an extra bleed on my bigger ones or on my smaller ones are totally fine too. So I'm just going to leave it at that. My color mode CMYK. So this particular project is not going to use any raster graphics whatsoever. If you use a raster graphic and it's something that you created but you still want to use it, you could either trace it yourself in Illustrator using your vector tools, or you can image trace it, and then image tracing might give you some pretty cool effects. It might do something interesting for you, but even with the image trace, you still have to play around with it. But I definitely don't want any raster images in here whatsoever. If I go to the links panel, I definitely don't want to see anything. However, if you did utilize a raster graphic to help you trace something, to help you come up with something interesting, use them as resources, that's fine, as long as they're not on any of the artboards. They could be on your workspace, but they can't be on any of the actual artboards. They could even potentially be on a hidden layer, a layer that is invisible. That's fine too, but they cannot actually be used on your artboards in any which way. I do not want to see any pixels on the artboard. So having said that, with the raster effects, the effects that used, you could use some effects on your vectors that are use raster effects, and they would have to be 300 pixels per inch, just so that the effect is really well done, and the pixels eventually the pixels used in those actually will be 300 pixels per inch, so they will look really good. However, no rasters, no pixels. Here we go. So I'm good with that. So I'm just going to create this. And what I have here now is, yes, I have my bleed, my red bleed line there. I'm going to zoom out. There it goes. Now my computer is a little bit slower when it's recording and going through this. So there's my red bleed line there. And I know that's a bleed. That's great. Now it's a 0.25 inch bleed. So it's an extra bleed that like I said, for something small like this, it's totally fine to have. It's not that big an issue. So this would be my logo. So what I want also here, not only do I want my layers organized, I want my artboards organized too. So this is going to be my logo artboard. And once again, 3.5 by 2, that's great. And what I can do next is I'm just going to zoom out here a little bit. And I'm going to make another artboard. So I'm just going to click and add a new one. And there's my artboard 2, which goes right next to it, which is totally fine. But this one is going to be, let's say, my app icon. And my app icon, I know, is going to be 3.4 by 3.4. Now, some of you might be saying, well, like, what's an app icon? What is that artboard for? Well, it's for an application logo that goes on any phone, any kind of iOS in terms of your tablet, or an iPhone, or any actually kind of smartphone. You would have this kind of application square, but it has those rounded corners, which I'm going to show you about in just a little bit too. So that's what that is. This one would actually appear digitally. So 3.4 by 3.4. I'm going to zoom out. And there it is, great. Now the thing about this, your layout is going to be different than my layout. You might have this really interesting background, kind of maybe a particular texture or pattern that you're making, and you need to move your artboards around even farther apart than they are. That's totally fine. You lay it out, but it should still make sense. You have all this workspace to work with. You really shouldn't have like this massive, the poster over here and a directional sign over here and something over here. I don't want to see that. What I do want to see is, your good sense and use of the workspace. That's all. So I'm going to add another one here. So let me say we're going to add our poster. So I'm going to make this the poster. And I know I'm going to double click on this icon here to change up the dimensions. I know that my poster is going to be 24 by 36. Those are the dimensions I gave you. Great. I'm going to zoom out. All right, now I see that my poster is on top of some of these other ones. Well, that's okay. I could obviously move that with my artboard tool. I'm just going to click on this. And I'm going to bring my artboard down. Now, once again, yours will look different than mine, the way this is rendering. My computer is having a bit of a hard time trying to show everything here, especially when my artboard tool is shown. Okay, so I have my poster set up now. That's great. So next what I'll do, I'm just going to do it this way. I'm just going to click on my artboard. I'm going to click and drag, hold on Option, and hold down Shift at the same time. Shift will keep it in line at 0 degrees, and Option will let me duplicate it. So that's another way to do it instead of just doing the plus. But it says poster copy. Well, I don't want it to be poster copy. I'm going to double click on this, and I'm going to change it. This is going to be my directional sign. All right, and I'm going to know that this, I'm going to double click and say it's going to be 24 by 24 inches, so 2 by 2 feet. And there I go. All right. Now, once again, you kind of look at these, you're like, well, I would love it if I brought this up, so I could just click on here and I could bring it up and kind of align it. But now my smart guides are on, so it's helping me align it. So smart guides, once again, if I wanted to go up to view and guides, smart guides, command U or control U on a PC will keep your smart guides on, so you can kind of keep things in line, and that would really help out. Okay, my next artboard, I'm going to look at my ticket. So let's look at my ticket here. So I'm going to do a ticket. And I know my artboard for my ticket is 5 by 7. Now the thing with the 5 by 7, it could also be a 7 by 5. Now, yes, we got to think about, now normally we go to a concert, maybe it's digital tickets, maybe something you print out, maybe something like that, which it can be just shown on your phone. That's cool too. But let's kind of go back a little bit old school where you're actually given a very specific ticket. It's printed, it's got numbering on it, it's got a perforation on it, some of that's get ripped off, which I'll talk about a little bit more in just a little bit. So there was my ticket artboard. Maybe I'll bring it down here. My ticket artboard, there it is. And now I need another one of these because you're going to have a double-sided ticket. You're going to have something on the front and something on the back as well. So I look at that. You know what? I'm going to look up here. I'm going to say ticket front. And I'm going to have ticket back. So I organize these really, really well. Because believe me, when you have a lot of artboards and you don't know what's what, it's great to label these to know exactly what's going on. And they're both the same size. But once again, if I wanted to make them landscape, I could make them 7 by 5. But in this situation, I'm going to keep it as is. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to make a new artboard again. Now this one moves just next to it, which is fine, but this is going to be my business card. So my business card, and once again, this is going to be my business card front. There's going to have a front and back to your business card. And I know that the dimensions for this, I'm going to double click here, are going to be 3.5 by 2, the standard size for a business card, 3.5 by 2 inches. Okay, there we go. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. There it is. Now, once again, if I want to move these around, I can, but in the meantime, I'm just going to leave them as is. I'm just going to grab this. I'm going to duplicate this. Just holding down Option and Shift on a Mac. And I click on this one. So notice that when you do click on an artboard, it gets selected here. I click on this artboard, that one gets selected. I click on this artboard, that gets selected. So I know exactly what they are. Now, it's not a bad idea to label them as well. I'm going to show you what I did with mine, but that's up to you if you want to do that. Just give you a little bit more organization, help you understand. So this is the back of the business card. Okay, good. Now, really, this is kind of all. There's the t-shirts as well, which I'm going to set up. A couple different ways to set these up. This is kind of all the ones you really need. Besides, now I'm going to add in the t-shirts. But what I'm going to do with this one, just to show you the use of the artboard tool, I'm going to click, and I'm going to click and drag. If I click and drag, I can actually lay out an 8.5 by 11 roughly. Now, once again, my computer is not really showing it too well, but that's okay. What I would see here is Artboard 9. Okay, so I could also just use the Artboard panel just to click and drag something out. So I'm just going to double click on here. I'm going to make it 8.5 by 11. Obviously, that wasn't even close. And there I go. Good. So what I'm kind of saying here is that my t-shirts, are going to be 8.5 by 11. In terms of that, the screen or the artwork that's going to go on it is going to fit an 8.5 by 11. But I'm going to show you an option you have if you want to, and how you want to actually display your t-shirts. So once again, I'm going to say t-shirt. Now I can do t-shirt 1, t-shirt 2, but I'm totally fine with that. Zoom out. I'm going to grab this. I'm just going to click and drag 2 more times. There I go. A little bit hard to see, obviously. And there's my third t-shirt. Okay, great. And t-shirt copy 1, t-shirt copy 2. Once again, I could just say t-shirt 1, t-shirt. Actually, let's do it this way. T-shirt 3 and t-shirt 2. The first one will just be 1. Okay, there I go. Now, once again, I can move these around however I want. I could bring them in the middle. I can, however I want to set them up. But once I start working with them, that's kind of what you want to, how you might want to move some things around. Realistically, when I start working with this, I start working with the poster right away. The poster is the biggest thing, and it's not say easier to take big things and scale them down smaller, but it's just something I like to work with, where the poster is kind of like that main thing. I really want to draw out something really amazing, play around with it, do some crazy stuff with it, and once again, utilize the workspace as much as possible. Work out ideas on the workspace. It's just on the gray of the workspace. It's not on the actual artboard. What's on the artboard will actually be printed or whatever. That's what's going to be on your PDF. But keep in mind, work out your anything on you want on the workspace. That's your work. Those are your ideas, your thoughts, and then you can actually utilize that and bring it onto an artboard, whatever you want. But that's how we should work things out. So I'm working on the poster. But now keep something in mind too. This is interesting, is that when I have all this set up right now on my artboards, I have a logo, app icon, I have everything here, and what I can do with that is how my PDF is going to be set up. So this is interesting. When I make my PDF, the first page that's going to show up is my logo, then the second and third and fourth. This actually also shows the number of pages you're going to have and the order that they're going to be in. Okay, so there's going to be 11 pages, and they're going to be numbered this way: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now let's say I wanted my poster to show up first. Sure, I could drag that up to the top. Now my poster is number 1. And then my logo. So this is actually now the new order of my PDF. Now nothing changed here. These are all just laid out here on the workspace. That's fine. But I can actually order these in a very specific way, that how I want them to show up on my PDF. But you know what? I'm just going to bring that one back down under the app icon. But that is a way. So even if you're working on another kind of file, you're working on, say, some business collateral, you have a logo, business card, envelope, letterhead, but you want the business card to show up first. Well, click and drag the business card up first, then the logo underneath, and that's exactly how it's going to show up on your PDF. Now, obviously, using Acrobat Professional, you could also organize it differently in Acrobat as well, organize your pages. But here's a nice quick way to already have it set up in Illustrator. So I have everything set up. This is more or less exactly what I want. I'm going to do just a few more things to set this up, and then I'm going to show you some best practices to work on the other file that I already had set up. Well, realistically, we should save this properly. Last name, first initial, section number, underscore festival. So you could do that as well. What I want to show now is I do want you to set up some margins. You have to set up margins for everything. Now, realistically, we don't really need margins for our t-shirts. We don't really need a margin for our logo, because these things aren't going to get, this is not going to get printed like this. This is not really going to get printed like this. You would send it to a company or a silkscreen company as well that can do that. Send it online somewhere, and they will show you how they want the artwork to be set up. So I'm not actually going to set up any margins there, but I'm going to set up margins for everything else. Now, when we're looking at margins, let's start with the poster. When I have a poster, now the minimum amount of margin I want is 1/8 of an inch, and that's our safety. So we don't want to put any important information past that margin too close to the artboard, because it could potentially get cut off if things are moved around a little bit when the printer is cutting things. We want to keep it within 1/8 of an inch, but realistically, we should have an even healthier margin to really kind of give some breathable space around that border, give it something there. Now, I definitely want to see a bleed. I definitely want to see some artwork bled out, or at least aligned, spaced out, extended to the bleed line. But let me at least set up a margin first. So let me do the poster. So I'm clicked on the poster. And I know that the poster is 24 by 36. So this is the quickest way to make margins in Illustrator. So I click on my rectangle tool and I'm just going to double click. And now, once again, I know that it's 24 by 36. So what I can do here now is I'm going to make a rectangle and then I'm going to convert that rectangle into guides. All right, so 24 by 36. Now, the minimum amount I would need is 23.75 by 35.75. Well, what did I just do there? What I did was I took away a quarter of an inch, 0.25, because an eighth of an inch is going to go up here, 0.125, 0.125, then from the sides as well, 0.125, 0.125. Now that's a very, very thin margin, very small safety, but that's the minimum I want. However, I don't want that. I want more than that. So what I'll do, I'll say, you know what, I could even do it half an inch around the whole border. I could do 1 inch around the whole border. Let's do 1 inch. Well, by doing 1 inch, I'm actually subtracting 1 inch here and 1 inch here. So that's 2 inches on the width and the height. So let's just go 22, and this was 36, so now it becomes 34. So once again, I subtracted 1 inch here and 1 inch here, 1 inch here and 1 inch here. So now yours might differ. You might want even more margin. You might want 20 by 30 or something like that. It doesn't matter. I'm just giving you a basic idea to work with so you could play around with your margins a little bit more. But the minimum amount should be an eighth, but you should definitely have more than that. So let's look at this. I'm going to say okay to that. And now what shows up is this other this path. Okay, well, what's the path? It's a black stroke and a white fill. It doesn't matter because as soon as I change it to a guide, it's going to convert to those kind of like cyan looking guides. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to line it up. I'm going to align center. I'm going to make sure obviously my artboard is selected, which it was. And now it's perfectly aligned inside my artboard, my poster artboard. So now what I could do is go to view in guides and make guides, or command 5. And that's it. Now it's a guide. I can see that it's a guide because it has that color around it. And the good thing about this is I could actually put this guide on its own layer, and I could shut the guides on and off, whatever I want to do. So let me do that right now. I'm going to make a new layer, or I could come up here and I could have done the same thing, new layer. I'm going to just double click on the word and call it guides. And I'm going to take that guide and I'm going to bring it up to guides. And now if I ever want to shut the guides off, I can because they're on their own layer. But the thing I also want to do as well is go to my guides, my view, guides, and I usually want to lock my guides. Now, if you've already set up all your guides first and then you work with it, you could always just select your guides, unlock them, select your guides, and put them on a layer later. So let's continue on here. So now I'm on this one as well, and I'm on my directional sign. I see that I'm on my directional sign. I've selected it. I'm going to double click, and I know once again it's 24 by 24. So what I'll do, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take an inch on either one. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do a little bit differently here. Let's just try it. I'm going to go 24. So I know it's 24. I'm going to make it 23. So I'm going to have half an inch, half an inch, half an inch, half an inch. I just want you to see the difference between a full inch border or margin and a half inch border. Okay, there we go. There it is. I'm going to align it in. I'm just going to cover it there a little bit. Align, align. If you don't see this on your control panel, you could open up this at the top. You can go to window and control, and that's your control panel up here. Or you can open up your line panel. Same idea, window, align, and you can just center, same idea. So you could find those anywhere. And that's it. So now I'm just going to go to view and once again guides and make guides, and now they're guides. I can once again go to my layer panel, click on it. Oh, I can't click on it because it's locked. So I'm going to go here and unlock my guides, and there I go, and there it is. It is on my guide layer because I did have that layer selected earlier anyways. So there's my guide there. But as we go on our smaller artboards, so our tickets and our business card, you know what I'm going to do real quick? I'm just going to bring this one over a little bit, just bothering me a little bit, but just to show you that that's what we can do. Okay. Held down Option, used my Artboard panel tool, and just brought it over. Artboard panel tool, just Artboard tool, sorry. So same idea here. So I click on this, and I'm just going to click my rectangle tool, and I know that these are 5 by 7, so 5 by 7. Now, am I going to take off a full inch or even half an inch on this? Probably not. I need a little bit more space on these ones, but I still don't want just an eighth of an inch, 0.125 around the whole thing. I probably want a little bit thicker, so I'd say between 0.25 and 0.5, but let's say 0.25. So what do I need to do? I need to take 0.25, 0.25, which is a full half inch on all the sides. So I'm going to make this 4.5 by 6.5. Say okay. Great, same idea, move it up. I know that my ticket front is selected, so I'm going to center, so center it horizontally and vertically, and view, and guides, and make guides, Command 5. Okay, now this one's already selected, and I have unlocked my guide, so I'm just going to duplicate it, hold on Option, hold down Shift, or hold down Alt and hold down Shift on a PC, and there I go. I have it lined up again. I'm going to select both, and now the ticket back is selected. See how I kind of did a selection there, and I just align to make sure it's perfect, because that's the whole point of a margin, is that it has to be perfectly aligned. Great. Now the same thing here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm going to do the same. So I'm going to click on my ticket, or my business card. I'm going to select my rectangle, double click, and I once again know it's 3.5 by 2. Well, now it's even smaller. Do I want to take away a full 1/2 inch? Yeah, maybe not. Do I want to take away 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch? You know, let's try it out. Maybe in this situation, I can give myself a little bit of margin, but if I have a lot of information, which in this case, we do have quite a bit of information to add, maybe I want to give myself a little bit less of a margin, but I am still going to do 0.25. So what do I need to do? 0.25, I need to take away half. So it's going to be 3. 1.5. Let's see what that looks like. Maybe it's too much. Maybe it's not. We'll see. So I'm going to bring that in, and I'm going to align it. Align. And I'm going to, let's just do it, Command 5, which now it is I use the keyboard shortcut Command 5 to make that. Once again, I just select it again, bring it over, hold down Shift and Option to duplicate it. And then I'm just going to align it again there. Align. And there I go. I have my guide there. And that's actually not too bad. But if you find that you need a little bit more space because there's a lot of information we need to put on there, well, let's do the opposite. Let's just do something else here. So instead of taking away a full 1/4 inch, I'm going to take away 1/8 inch. So let's do this to say, so that's going to be 3.5 by 2, because I know that this is Artboard's 3.5 by 2. So I'm going to go 3.25. So I'm taking away 1/8 inch here, 1/8 inch here. And same here, I'm going to say 1.75. Okay, bring that over here. I'm just giving you options here to see what might work best for you. I'm going to center, and I'm Command 5. So there you go. So now you can see that I have more space to work with where I can kind of keep the important information within my margin, and maybe this works a little bit better, so I could still kind of utilize all the space in here, but not worry too much about going too far close to the edge. So that margin might really help me out. So you might prefer to make it 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch. It's entirely up to you. And once again, this is the front of the business card, so maybe you really don't need it as much. In the back of the business card, there's more information potentially, so maybe you do want a little bit more, but it's entirely up to you. But in this situation, just to be on the safe side and to be consistent, I'm going to keep them both the same, and I'll give myself a little less of a margin so I can utilize that space a little bit more. Center, and there I go. Now, one last one, really, I'm going to work with the app icon, because the app icon might need it as well. I don't want to get too close to the border. I want to give myself a little bit of a safety, but the logo in the t-shirt ones, I'm not really going to mess around with. Now, I know this is 3.4 by 3.4, but there's not really have to worry too much because this is more of a digital thing, not really a print thing. All the other ones are print related. This is digital. So I am going to make something here, but just to give myself a guide, just say, don't go too close to the borders. So 3.4, 3.4. Maybe what I'll do is make it 3 by 3. Because there's also going to be a rounded background here to kind of give us an idea of what the rounded corner radius of those apps kind of looks like, especially on an iPhone or iOS in general. So once again, I'm going to center, and I'm going to Command 5, and now it's that. And now they're all set up just the way I need them to be. So you know what? I'm going to go down to my layers, and I'm going to lock that layer. That layer, I do not want those guides to move. They're never going to move. So I could lock the layer there and say my guides aren't going to move, or of course I can just go to my view and lock my guides. But this is kind of an interesting way to do it too, so I don't have to keep doing that or learn my keyboard shortcut, and I could just lock them, and if I ever want to move them around, I can unlock them and I can move them around. But the whole point is not to move them. Either way, here we go. That's what we have. We're happy with that. Now, really, realistically, there's only a little bit more here to do with the ticket. So the ticket, if I look back at the other one that's already made, well, what's different about this ticket than all the other artboards? And what's very important about this part as well? I want you to make sure you're fully aware of how the perforation needs to work and the numbering needs to work. Okay, so what we have here is I have my ticket front and my ticket back. So this is what I did to label my tickets and all my artboards. I put a little bit of information up here just to say, the size of them, what they were, and exactly what it is. So not only can I refer back to my artboards, I could look here, but look at what I did with my artboards too. Not only did I label them, I also put the actual dimensions of them as well. It just gives me that kind of understanding. So, oh yeah, that's right, that's the name of them. The size of them, that's what it is. So I put a lot of information in here, just in case, you ever have to pass this over to another designer, just in case, whoever needs to see this needs to see some of those things. This just will help out that much more. It's very organized. It's really, really good, very professional. It really looks nice. So getting back to this, you might not be able to see it, but there is a dashed line here. Well, the dashed line is suggestive of our perf. So meaning that when I send this to the printer is going to know that this needs to be a perf line, meaning it's going to be perforated, meaning this part is going to get ripped off. So when I go to the concert or the festival, whatever the case is, they're going to take my ticket, they're going to rip this part off, and that's exactly what I want. They get a piece and I get a piece. Now, the thing on the back of it is that same perf line shows up in the exact same position, but I also have some numbering. So this number sequence is here. Well, the numbering is there to say, okay, how many tickets were printed, how many tickets were sold, whatever the case is. And then also, when I rip this off, they get a piece of that number, they get one of that number, and I get a piece of that number. So it's a kind of a way to track. There's a bit of security in that as well. I know nowadays, obviously, everything's digital, but there is this kind of part that you can kind of still do that is a bit of a security feature. And once again, you make sure that the person comes in. I even wrote a little portion. This portion of the ticket will be removed and act as validation you have entered into the venue. So it's kind of that idea too. So kind of like an old school way, but it's still usable, obviously. Now this extra little magenta I put around it is to suggest that when the numbering actually goes on, when the printer puts this numbering on, they actually need a little bit more space around the whole thing. They can't just put a number wherever you want, especially if it gets too close to the perf line. But I definitely want a number on this side of the perf somewhere and a number on this side of the perf. It doesn't have to be exactly like this. I could actually have this, number somewhere else, which is totally fine. I'm just going to shut this off real quick, lock my background and texture, and I can grab my type. And it's just not letting me select it quite well right now, so I'm just going to lock my Dieline there as well. There we go. So I could actually move these numbers around. I could move them. I could move this one all the way up here if I want to, and I could have this number down here if I want to. It doesn't matter, but visually it should still make sense. But we also have to give ourselves a little bit of space around it too. Okay, so there's my main number, and there's my guide. So if I shut my Dieline off, the numbers will still be there. That's how the numbers will look. And there's going to be that perforated line there as well. And there's not going to be any ink on it. It's just going to have a perforation. It's going to be cut into it. But the numbers will be there, so it gets ripped off. And this one disappears more or less. This part of the portion of the ticket is gone. But this one, I still get to keep my number there as well. So that's kind of the reason why we do that. So it's good idea, it's good practice to give yourself a little bit of a box around it. So if I look at that, it could potentially be 1/4 of an inch around the top and bottom and sides, more potentially 1/8 of an inch. So just to give you that. Now a printer could actually tell you exactly how their machine works and how much space you should leave. But in this case, probably 1/8 of an inch, which I'm going to set up on the other one as well. So I'm just going to copy this in, and I'm going to make the dash a little bit separate too. So I'm going to go to my new artboard that I've made, and I'm going to set this up. Okay. So on this one, here's my ticket. Number one, what I'm going to set up, my dash line. So I'm going to make a line. I could use my line tool. I could use my pen tool. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to use this layer now. And I'm just going to click and drag. Now, depending on your ticket and your artwork and how it's laid out, your line might be somewhere a little bit different, but it shouldn't be like halfway. It shouldn't be anything like that, because I just want to rip off a little bit of a portion, enough that shows where the number is and maybe some other, disclaimer information, but not much else. So remember, it's going to get ripped off. So you want to make sure that the important information is at the top, and anything that doesn't really need to be there anymore can get just ripped off, and it's not a big deal. So here I have a solid black line. Well, my perf has very specific specs. So what I want my perf to be. It has to be a magenta line, so it's magenta now. And my stroke, it has to be a dashed line. Now, if I make it very specific, I believe I make it 3 dash and 3 gap. And if I don't fill the rest of these in, that's okay, because it's just going to repeat what it sees. 3 dash, 3 gap, 3 dash, 3 gap. And that's what I have there. Perfect. However, a little thicker. So what I like to do with mine, I like to make these a little bit smaller. So my weight is going to be 0.125, so 1/8 of a point. So that's all I need. The printer will know where it is. They'll be able to see it. And it doesn't kind of take away too much from the artwork either. So I have that there. Perfect. So there's my perforated line. It's a dashed magenta line that is here, and it suggests that it's going to be perforation. Now, the thing about this is that we have to understand this needs to be the exact same position on the front artboard as it does on the back artboard. So in terms of its height. Now with you, depending on how you do this, yours actually might be slightly different in terms of its position. So let's pretend that I chose to put my perforation up here like this. So I'm going to make it go this way for some very odd reason. Doesn't matter. And I can even have it extend past to my bleed line. Okay, so let's pretend this part was going to get ripped off. I'm just going to get rid of these for now. This part was going to get ripped off. Now keep in mind, let's actually do it this way so I'm very specific. I'm going to bring it up to my edge, and I'm just going to bring it in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with my arrows. Okay, if it's here, that means the back side of this, it's going to be here. So if I flip that ticket around, it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to be here. Not the exact same. It's not going to mirror it, or sorry, it's not going to be the exact same like here. I have one here and I have one here. No, that's not going to work, because when you flip this around, it's actually going to show up here. So keep that in mind. If you are going to do a perforation kind of like this, or change it up a little bit, if you're going to do a 7x5 instead of a 5x7, the perforation needs to be in the same spot but mirrored on the other side. So I'm just going to do those. And bring those back to my bottom ones there. There we go. Okay. So I have those set up. That's great. Now what I want to do, I want to bring in my numbering. So let's just do that. So I'm just going to click on there. 88888. Sorry, had my shift on. 88888. Usually 5 numbers of 8 kind of show you. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. Now the thing is, technology's changed with numbering that they could digitally do it. It doesn't need a machine to do that. I'm going to center it. And they can print bigger numbers. They can print different typefaces. They can print different colors. So there's a lot of different things that can happen now with technology and printing. So it's really, really beneficial. But always ask your printer to say, hey, number one, what can you offer me in terms of my numbering? Can it be digital, or does it have to be another machine? How much space do I really need around it? All that stuff. So it's good to ask, the typefaces that are available, and of course, colors as well. But what I want to do here now, at least, is to give myself that kind of a bit of a rectangle around it, just so I know the space. Because if I brought this number, I'm going to make this a stroke, not a fill. And I'm going to make it magenta because I know it's just a die line. It's not really going to be printed. It's not really there. So let me do that. Make it magenta. There we go. And I could even make it 0.125. I think on my other one I made it a little bit bigger, but that's okay. As long as it's there, as long as it's noticeable. Cool. And it's right in the middle, and that's great. Just to be on the safe side, let me select both. Select that one again. There we go. And center. Okay, so it's there. Now, because if I came too close to this, I want the number to be right there. Well, that's probably not going to work. It's not going to work well because the printer's going to say, no, it's too close. Maybe even it's too close to the other number. If I wanted to kind of do something like that. So, no, you need more space. Okay. So what I can do, I'm just going to space this out over here. Maybe I'm just going to put it over here. That's fine. And my other number, I'm going to hold down Option, hold down Shift, and bring it down there. So now on either side of my perforation is my number. I have my number here, number there. That's the whole point of sequential numbering and having it so it shows up on both sides of the perf. So if I rip this part off, I still have the number, and the number is also on this part. And this could even be for even a smaller event where you might actually have a draw, and you could actually use this where you take this portion off, you put it in you save it, someone draws a number, and then these numbers are the same, and whoever draws this number gets called, and you potentially win a prize or something like that. So always good. That's how we want to do that. That's how we want to play around with that. I do not need to put the numbers on both sides of the ticket. Not important. At least it shows, as long as it shows up on one side, that's all I need. It has a little box around it. Now, what can I do with all this information? Well, realistically, the perfs and the boxes are die lines. So what can I do? Let's make a new layer and call it die line. All right, there we go. And I'm going to take all that information and bring it up here. Well, what about the words? Well, the words are type, so let's make a type. I'm just actually going to take this layer 1 and make it, call it type. And now I have my type layer. And these particular numbers are on my type layer. Perfect. And then I would put all my type on there. So this is really the kind of only thing you really need to worry about in terms of tech specs that need to make sense. The other thing was our app icon. I kind of spoke about that before. And on this app icon here, I'm a little too far. Let me zoom out a little bit. I have rounded corners on my background, or at least something to suggest that this is actually kind of like what it would look like on the actual face of your phone with those rounded corners, especially, like I said, on the iOS. So what I have here is a 0.56 corner radius. So let's actually do that. So I'm going to go to my app icon here. I'm going to fill in a box. Remember, I don't have to go to the bleed on this one because this is a digital piece. It's not an actual print piece. So what I can do here is when I click on it with my black arrow tool, these little circles show up here, and that allows me to round my corners. Now, if I wanted to, I could also go to Effect and Stylize, and I can round the corners there and put in a very specific number. But I'm going to give you this number here. It's actually going to be 0.56. Now, what I could do is when I do this, when I click and drag, a number shows up. There it is, R 0.34, whatever. So that's radius, and I could actually change this now. What I found was 0.56 is pretty close to what that rounded corner is, and that's it. Just click and drag and try to find 0.56, drag slowly and zoom in if you can't see it. And there you go. So there's my background for that app icon. So I'm going to fit everything in there. My margin still works quite nicely. And because this is a background, well, let me make a new layer. I'm going to call it background. And I'm going to bring this up. So now this particular layer is on that background layer. I'm going to drag my background layer to the bottom because guess what? Backgrounds are underneath everything and should be at the very base of it all. And that's kind of the setup. That's kind of it. I could play around with this a little bit. With my t-shirts, which I'm going to show you best practice for those as well. I can, if I wanted to as well, set up full well knowing that I'm going to have a 5x5 background for a darker background, so because I want to reverse, so maybe I could do that too. I'm just going to click and drag, or sorry, not click and drag, just double click. I know that half of this is going to be 5x5 because right now it's 10x5, so half of it's going to be 5x5. There's my 5x5, and I'm just going to line it up here. And because I have my smart guides on, it kind of helps me line it up there. So one logo is going to be something on white. So it's going to what it would look like on white. And then the reverse of that, what would that logo look like if it was on something darker? And I definitely want you to show me that, because that's definitely a part of branding logos, is not only making one logo. That logo has to work in many different situations. So if I go back to mine here, I'll know that my logo needs to not only work, reverse, it could also have to work stacked. So if it's in a square situation or a rectangle situation. So I'm only asking you to do two versions. That's a normal and then a reverse version. And this obviously works in both those situations. Better on one, granted, but it still works here as well. So let's go through this really quickly. So I have my app icon first, and that works out quite well. It's decent. It fits inside, it's nice, and I stay away from the margin. And even if I shut my die lines off there, it looks really good on its own, as if it was going to go on a phone. Well, that's really cool. Then I have my logo. Okay, so I have my half. I have one side that is dark, one side that is light, so that's my reverse. Now I did, as I mentioned, I start off with my poster. I like to do all my work on my poster first, because here's where everything's going to go. I'm going to have a lot of content. I'm going to have my pattern in the background or a texture. I'm going to have a lot going on. Now I do utilize my workspace for my logo and playing around, but I kind of knew what I wanted to do here. There could have been a lot more work there, that's for sure. So I played around with this particular production company presented this. Now you could do that, you don't have to, but it just adds a little something else there. put my logo in, I put the band. So you do need to show 20 different artists. Now, once again, this does not have to be for music, or it could be any kind of event where maybe potentially I want it to be for, let's say a food truck type event, where this would be the names of all the different food trucks. And once again, if they all had logos, maybe I put their logos in there and kind of play around. So the part of this assignment is to really utilize different spaces and how you're going to show something very consistent, obviously the look of everything, but also utilizing different amounts of type and different graphics, and utilizing all those different types of collateral. So here I'm asking for at least 20 let's say artists or vendors or something like that are going to be at this particular festival, and you need to show them in a unique way, because usually that is also part of the main draw. So when you look at some music festivals, it's kind of like, okay, this, Lollapalooza, wow, that's really cool, but who's playing there? And that's usually the draw of like who's going to be there. So this definitely has to stand out too. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about hierarchy. So the interesting thing about music festival posters or any type of event poster is like, what is the hierarchy? What is the main thing I want you to see? And then the second, and then the third, and then the fourth thing, and then so on. Because there's a lot of information that does need to be on here. Now, realistically, there's websites people can go to. They can go get even more information. However, we can definitely still put a lot of interesting, good, engaging information on the print material to, once again, get that engagement, get people talking. They're aware of what's going on. So here's my big logo. Yeah, I definitely want to push that this is like this, I called it the Molto Festival. Have this cool heart icon, and I strongly suggest with your logo that once again you have an icon part of it and a word mark part of it, but you also say what it is, because no one knows what this is. So if I didn't have music festival there, now people could probably tell from the bands that I put there that it's probably a music festival. But if it's a food festival, put food festival. If it's a tattoo expo, then put it's a tattoo expo. If it's a farmer's market, then put it's a farmer's market. Even though if people know what Lollapalooza is, potentially we should still put music festival, just because not everyone knows what it is, but it might help. So I always strongly suggest putting what the thing actually is along with your logo as well. It always helps out. Then I put the names of all my artists that'll be there. And then I also put, of course, very important, when it is, what time it starts, and where it is. Very important. Now, I didn't put full information, exactly the location, the address. Once again, it's going to be on my website. People can Google it. So I can kind of get away with not putting every little piece of information there, which is very useful. But in yours, I definitely want to see when, at what time, and then where. That's definitely important. Well, another part I wanted to see is your ticket prices. So maybe you have a 1-day ticket, 2-day ticket, 3-day ticket, some kind of ticket price in general. Even if it's just one ticket price, I definitely want to see how you handle the pricing. Then I want to see obviously a URL, so some kind of contact information. I want to see what it would look like with some social media. So minimum 3 pieces of social media. I got Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram here. And I also put a QR code. Now I'm going to give you a QR code, but you could also make your own. There's a QR code generator. Right now I gave you one on the assignment sheet, and I could put it on the comments here of this particular YouTube video, but also there's many. If you Google QR code, you can get so many for free. There's great ones. There's also ones you can access through InDesign actually, but I'm not going to go there. And you can do it through Illustrator as well. So I definitely have a QR code. So I definitely want you to show me a barcode or a QR code, one or the other, as if we're going to scan something like that. So I think that would be useful. And you also need to show some type of charity that is going to be donated to. So that's always a great idea. Even in events in general, people like to kind of have this option that, the money that is going to be taken is going to be invested and put into some type of donation, some charitable cause that is, hits close to home, or people just appreciate that, which is really, really nice. So I definitely, if you could make it up, or it could be real, this is a real one here in the Falls, Niagara region, Project Share. So I just say proceeds go to Project Share, and there's a little URL for that too. So something a little extra, but I definitely need to show me how some type of charity that is benefiting from this event. And you could just say proceeds go to, or you could actually put in the URL as well, or a phone number, or anything. Or even if they have a logo, which Project Share does, maybe I should have put it in there, but you could put a logo in too of that particular charity as well. So this is a great way to get started, is just playing around with here and how all this content is going to be made. Then what I did from here, now keep in mind I also made this interesting texture in the background. It's a pattern, a texture, however you want to make it. And I put it on its own layer, because that layer is going to be you know, there's a lot going on with that. I definitely need you to have this as a part of your brand. So the brand is what? Let's talk about branding for a second. The branding is your look. So that would be the icon, the logo, the overall colors used, the typefaces chosen. And I love to add pattern or texture to that too. So there's a recognizable pattern or texture that also goes along with the brand. So when people just see this particular texture, let's pretend this texture was just on its own, people hopefully would be able to kind of relate it to this actual brand. So that's kind of a fun thing to do as well. All right, so having done that, this is all done. I'm kind of finished. All my stuff is done. That's all I need to do now is take all these elements that I've made and bring them onto my other artboards, my other collateral. So then I made my ticket. Okay, so I brought over everything. I brought my logo over. I was happy with it. I brought everything over. And I started playing around with the information, how it's going to be laid out. Okay, well, now I know that on my logo, I have my perforation. Okay, there's my perforation on both sides, on both tickets. And it happens to be in the exact same position, correct? And I have my numbering, and I have my little box around there too that suggests, you know what, maybe I should change up that box just to be on the safe side. It doesn't need to be that big. Maybe I will make it 0.125. Okay, and I'll lock that up again. And what I can do here on the back side of that, I can kind of spread the information out. Now, could I have put the bands on the front side to make it even more engaging? For sure, and take some of this information, put it on the back. I could have totally done that. This is how I chose to do this. I still have my QR code, my social media icons, my URL. I have that. I put a little bit of disclaimer information, which I've also given you that disclaimer information you could put down. You have it in there some way, but once again, disclaimer information doesn't need to be huge, doesn't need to be big, or can it be smaller? Someone could read it because it's not that important, but I do need to have it on there. So yeah, I could definitely make it smaller. So I made my ticket, and then I made my business card. So what do I have to have on my business card? I have the logo. That's great. The texture stays there as well too. And then I'm also going to have my name, my position, and the contact information as well. So what do I need? Contact information, phone number, URL, an email to reach me at, and my address, just some random address. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be real. It can be real. It could be faked for this particular situation, but it all comes together. My social media, my QR code, great things to have on your business card. Okay, so then what else did I do? Well, I made my directional sign. Okay, there it is, 24 by 24. So what needs to be on there? You definitely want to have, you know, pertaining to the brand once again. So I have my logo on there. So I have the logo. Then I put just a few main ones here. Washrooms, main stage, merch booth, food and drink, info area, first aid. If you want to add more, you could definitely add more. There's definitely more places in usually an event space or people need to know where some of that is. So if you want to add more of these, you totally could do that. If you want to add some icons, which I did, I added some icons to help people. Once again, not everyone speaks potential the English or whatever the language it happens to be. So maybe I do need to have, maybe it's an international festival. So there's tons of different people there, which is fantastic. So maybe some of these icons will help people understand exactly where these places are. So once again, if you want to add icons, you can. If you want to add more options, you can as well. Now, this is just one way to do it. There's so many different ways. Arrows usually help, obviously. Help people direct where they're going, if they're going right, left, up, down, whatever the case is. But also, I've seen in the past where people use maps. They use actually a fairly detailed map of, hey, this is what it looks like, and this is where the merch is, and the main stage is over here. So there's many different ways to show a directional sign, but this is just a quick and easy way I showed mine, but obviously still sticks with my brand and works quite well. And then I went on to do some t-shirts. So this is kind of what I was talking about here. You could either do the t-shirt this way, and the 8.5 by 11 will actually be the space that you're allowed to put some ink on. Well, this one I used this. I just put that there, and I definitely just want to see a minimum of 3, but I've definitely seen people do a lot more, and it's kind of fun. And that's what I've done here. I did a few extra. The other thing you could do, instead of having it like this and showing what the shirt might look like with the graphic there, you can put the actual template of the shirt inside your 8.5 by 11 and show like that. Because realistically, as vector work, if you submit this to a screen printer or whomever that you're going to send this to, it's a vector graphic. They would just blow it up to fit the size of what it is. Remember, you could scale vector graphics. No quality is lost, and the file size doesn't change. So we can do that as well. So a couple different ways to actually set up your t-shirts. Artboard is to actually put the t-shirt right on the artboard like that, the template, or have it larger and then actually have your artboard be the full 8.5 by 11 where the ink or that design can actually go. So it's up to you how you want to do that. Now I added a couple extras here. So what extras did I add? I added a rack card. So a rack card could also be informative, where you put them out there, you print them off. They're 4x9, which is usually the standard, and you have all that information on there. So I have this as my front of the rack card. Now the back of the rack card, I wanted to fill it up a little bit more. Normally with rack cards, what you have pictures to really promote the event or promote whatever it is you're promoting. I just put a bunch of type in here. So I just added my own type, and I put some information about Project Share. I made it look really good down here. So try to make it as engaging and fun as possible. So even the type, even though it's narrow, even though it's a little medium, it's medium condensed, it's still readable, still legible. It's a 9-point type, so if someone have this in their hand, they're definitely going to be able to read this properly, which is kind of nice. So we also have to think about legibility. Legibility is a big one too. So I definitely say you could kind of break a few rules, maybe in terms of leading and kerning and different things like that, things being bigger than they should or whatever. But you should still be careful about the average person reading these, the information on this. Like, how are they actually going to take this information in? And is it readable enough? Is it kind of like overboard? Is it too much? Because even this is hard to read, but it's legible, meaning you know it's there, you can see something, but is it readable? Could it be more readable? Sure. But that was kind of my thing. I really wanted to engage. So there's some, like I said, some rules you could break here. The other things I added too, if you were interested in adding some more, I added a lanyard. Now I kind of measured out a few lanyards before. This one's 33.5 by 1, so you could definitely look at that too if you're interested, to make a lanyard, just to see what this would look like. So that's the thing that goes around your neck and potentially has like a backstage pass on it, which I also made a backstage pass for this particular festival. So you could kind of play around with that too if you wanted to. It's actually pretty interesting. The backstage pass I just made 4 by 5 inches. I looked at a few and saw they're somewhat different sizes. Now there might be a little die cut circle hole there, so you got to keep that in mind. But when you're making these, you would talk to the person who's making them and say, okay, can I have rounded corners? Is it going to be laminated? Is it going to have that die cut circle? You know, and then you could kind of figure some of those things out there too. So it has a front and a back, if you want to add those ones as well. So those are just extra: the rack card, the lanyard, and even more shirts. You could have 100 shirts, it doesn't really matter, but realistically, how many would you really print for a specific event, and how many would you sell? And you do have to be careful there. So cost is also an issue as well. The next thing I want to look at is my layers. So I really went to town and really organized myself really well with my layers, because once again, when you have so many things overlapping on top of each other, you really want to have a lot of layers to organize yourself. So what do I have first? I have my background layer. So my background layers were all the backgrounds that I have on every single artboard. Okay, so I lock that, because from time to time I don't want them to interfere, and I just want to play around with things that, like, I just want to select this. Well, then you select that because everything's shut off. My texture layer, which is on top of my background layer, these two might be the same. Your background layer might be your texture layer, whatever it is. That's a separate one where I have those just as my texture layers on these 3 particular artboards. Actually, I believe it's on my rack art too. So I have my textures on those artboards. I lock them. So I can shut them off. I can play around with them separately, whatever I want to do. My graphics. So my only graphics I have are kind of here, and even my social media could have been on my graphics, but I kept them apart as my type just because it was a little easier for me to work with. Then I have my type. So if I could shut all my type off, well, that's all my type. So it's all connected. If I need to change something, I could change something. So much easier. If I want to shut everything off, I could shut everything off and just work with my type. And that works out quite well too. So it's just easier to work with. The more layers you have, the more organized you are, it's going to be so much more helpful. And once again, if you have to pass this over to another designer, it just becomes so much easier. And then I had a logo. So I put all the logos that are on any piece of artboard here are on their own. It's on its own layer. So once again, if I need to change something, I just want to look at the logos, I can do that too, and really kind of focus on that if I need to. And the last one I had was my die line. Now my die line actually makes up quite a bit more, and the great thing about Illustrator is I could put grouped layers inside grouped layers inside grouped layers. So let's take a look. I'm going to twirl that one down, and what do I have? I have my numbering on its own grouped layer inside of the die line layer. So I could shut that off, and yeah, I can see my numbering. Those boxes were around there. But this actually specific numbering was still on the type layer because I want to work with it as type. But the boxes that went around it were that particular, the boxes there, sorry. The boxes there are, let me zoom in. There we go. So those boxes are the numbering boxes. I just put them on there for myself, but I can shut them off anytime. That's the great thing about that, is like they don't need to show up as artwork, but I do need them to use them as guides so I could design something around them. My perforations are on a separate layer. So I just have those two, which is 1, 2 lines. That's it. I have my artboard names. So all those names I put on all the artboards, they're on their own separate layer because I don't want them to interfere with when I want to select something or anything. So I did put them on their own layer, and I obviously can lock them, which I usually do with Dielines, because once my Dieline's there, I really don't want to move it around. And then my guides. So all of my guides, once again, as I was showing you before, you can take all your guides and put them on their own layer and shut them on, turn them off, whatever you want if you don't need them. Another good thing to work with too, if you ever want to kind of get rid of your guides and certain things and you don't want to look at the workspace, is this really cool option, Trim View. Now it's very similar to Preview mode in InDesign, but they have their own, Illustrator has its own called Trim View. Now it doesn't have a keyboard shortcut, which I'm sure you can set up your own keyboard shortcut when you want to make your own keyboard shortcuts here under Edit. But right now I'm just looking at Trim View, and Trim View once again just shuts everything off that does not need to be seen, the guides, any workspace, and you can just focus on your artboards, which is really cool. So this gives me a good understanding of what everything will look like without any of the distraction in my workspace or whatnot, or my bleeds. It also shuts your bleeds off as well, so you see what the artwork looks like if it was cut exactly as it is. So I hope this helps you put this together much quicker, help you understand how to lay this out. It actually is very simple, especially once you lay out one, you quickly create your look of using your typefaces, using your artwork, your logo, your branding, you create everything, your texture, your pattern, whatever it is, and then you bring it here, fix it up here, bring it here, fix it up here, bring it here, and then you're kind of good to go. And then you can really fine tune. The thing that I found was that when I did play around with my poster and then I brought it down here to my ticket, I found there's some things I needed to tweak. So when I played with it here, I was like, you know what, I don't like the way this turned out, I'm gonna fix it here. I don't like the way this turned out, I'm gonna fix it here. So you're gonna find yourself going back and forth between Collateral and finding, you know, the logo works better like this, so let me change it over here. Or on the business card, the logo works like this, so maybe I should change it over here. So you might find yourself being like, no, I love the logo the way it is, perfect. And then when you move it to other Collateral and start playing around at the different scale, a different dimension, you might realize, no, you know what, maybe I do need to tweak it, maybe I do need to change it. So you might find that as well. I hope this helps and you create some amazing designs.